What's going on, everybody? I'm Patrick Chapla, founder of POWLAX and creator of POWLAX Master Coach, and in this video we're going to dive into the 21-12 motion offense. So the 21-12 motion offense is a concept that I designed because I was beginning to get frustrated that players didn't really understand the complete ideas of our motion, and really they just didn't understand the half steps within the motion. And I'll give you an example. If we're in a 2-3-1 set running a dodge, follow, float midfield motion with a clear through attack motion, once the midfielder dodges down the alley and we get our rotations, we're no longer in our 2-3-1 set. We're actually in an umbrella set with 2 players behind, 1 on the crease, and 3 players in the umbrella above. And what I found was that players within this new formation often didn't really understand what to do. So oftentimes players would freeze or they would give up good looks because they wanted to get back into that 2-3-1 set. So to combat this, I wanted to design a new way of teaching offensive motion strategies that would be simple enough for players to understand not only all of the motions that we were using, but how they integrate together to create a fast-paced, free-flowing offense that relied on the player's ability to read the field and not a predetermined set of rules that we needed to use to stay within our motion. The next thing I wanted to make sure we had was a system that would be easy enough for youth coaches to implement, but could also be built upon so that more advanced coaches and teams could use it to run more advanced types of plays and motions. And to do these things, we needed to have 3 basic concepts covered. First, it would use at least 2 simple 3-man motions that would all start and end in one of 2 simple formations. That way, players who got confused while running the offense would easily be able to find their place back within it and continue running the motion. Second, since all of the motions go into and out of the same 2 basic formations, once the players understand one motion, they will easily be able to grasp any new motion that we want to add in and ultimately build an offense that can fluctuate easily based on what the defense is giving us. And third, eventually it will allow any player who catches the ball on offense to dodge to either their right or their left with no fear of breaking the rules of our offense. All of the off-ball players will have to react to the dodger rather than the dodger having to dodge to a specific location. And this will create an offense that is unpredictable and is able to react to the field rather than having to do specific things to remain within our offensive concept. And out of these 3 concepts, the 21-12 offense was born. And as we've started to run it with our players seem to understand it more and can therefore run our motion offensive concepts with a lot more speed and a lot more flow, which creates a ton of havoc on the defensive side of the ball. In this video, we're going to teach you what the 21-12 motion offense actually is, how it works, and why it's easier for coaches to teach and for players to understand than the traditional 2-3-1, 1-4-1, 2-2-2, and open theories of thinking about an offensive set. And then we're going to teach you exactly how we start to build it within our program and give you guys a basic, simple set that you can begin building it with your teams. In future videos, we'll build in more complex concepts and how to integrate a little further, but for now, we just got to get a base. The 21-12 offense is a motion offense that uses 2 groups of 3 players that will move into and out of 2 distinct formations, allowing us to use multiple motions and strategies to seamlessly move from one formation into another and then back again. Ultimately, it will allow our players to make decisions on the field based on where the ball carrier wants to go, rather than having to do something specific and go in one direction, because that's what the offense is. The rules of the 21-12 offense are defined by 3 characteristics: groupings, formations, and motions. First is groupings. The 21-12 set has 2 groups of 3 players, 3 midfielders and 3 attackmen. The midfield group is defined by the first number, in this case 21. 2 plus 1 equals 3. And the attack group is defined by the second number, in this case 12, where 1 plus 2 equals 3. Second is our starting formation. This is also defined by the numbers that we use, and these indicate how these 2 groups should set up to start the offense. If the midfield number is 21, they will set up with 2 players up top and 1 on the crease. If the midfield number is 12, they will set up with 1 midfielder up top and 2 on the high wings. The same goes for the attack numbers. If it is 21, the attack will set up with both players on the wings and 1 at X. If it is 12, they will begin with a player on the crease and players at back left and back right. These formations can be combined to fulfill 4 separate traditional sets. 21-21 is a traditional 2-3-1, 21-12 is a traditional 2-2-2, 12-21 is a traditional open set, And 12-12 is a traditional umbrella set, and our 21-12 offense can move into and out of these formations fluidly based on simple rules. Finally, we have the motions and rotations, and this is what sets 21-12 apart from teaching motion offense in any other way. First, we need to clarify what I mean by a motion and a rotation. A motion is any movement that a group makes when that group has the ball, and a rotation is any movement that a group makes that is a reaction to the other group moving. So, in our dodge, follow, float, and clear through example, the midfielders are running a dodge, follow, float motion because M1 has the ball, and the attackmen are running a clear through rotation. The main idea is that each group will use motions and rotations from one set into another and back again. Groups can move from a 21 set into a 12 set, a 12 set into a 21 set, a 21 set into a 21 set, or a 12 set into a 12 set. The huge idea here is that this is going to allow us to train and incorporate a ton of different motions and rotations into our offensive strategy without compromising the integrity of our offensive rules, because each motion or rotation that we add in will correspond to the principle of starting and ending in either a 21 set or a 12 set. For instance, over time, we can integrate these 4 midfield motions to move from a 21 midfield set into a 12 midfield set. We can use a dodge, follow, float, a dodge, pop, fade, a sweep, fade, float, and a sweep, pick, float. All of these are going to have us starting in the same positions and ending in the same positions, but ultimately cause the defense to do different things. We can also add in these 3 different types of rotations: a clear through, fill, fill, a fade, push, cut the middle, and a fade, cut the middle, fade. If you decide to use multiple motions and rotations, I recommend giving them different distinct names. For instance, our dodge, follow, float is called regular, whereas our dodge, pop, fade is called delta. Now we're going to get into exactly how we want to start training the 21-12 motion offense concept to our players. And so the first thing we need to do is decide on a couple of motions and rotations that we're going to teach our players first, and then go over some guidelines so that we can slowly build it into their understanding rather than dumping the whole load of the entire offense on them all at once. And so at a bare minimum to run the 21-12 offense, we're going to need 3 things: 2 motions and 1 rotation. One motion should go from a 21 set into a 12 set, and the other should go from a 12 set into a 21 set. The rotation that we can use will work whether or not a dodge is forcing the opposite group to move or its own group to move, so we only need to do 1 rotation. For this video, we're going to be using the triangle concept of motions and rotations, where players are going to be moving together on a string where they're keeping their spacing and reinforcing the movement ideas like that, because usually players understand those a lot quicker than they do anything where players are moving against the grain but then need to end up in a specific spot. We're also going to use guidelines where players are only allowed to dodge from the top or from X. And this is going to create a much simpler idea for us because we won't have anything from the wings, so the players can really get used to how the motions work and are integrated together before having too many dodge locations. For most youth teams, these 2 motions, single rotation, and the guidelines to dodge from either X or up top are all you'll need to create a very well-oiled motion offense that can be very successful at the youth and the high school level. But for teams who want to get a little more advanced, eventually we will build in more motions as well as allow players to dodge from any location on the field and still remain within the concepts of our offense. We'll be having some videos on some of my favorite pairings of motions and rotations and show you exactly how they work together in a couple of later videos. Now we're going to get into exactly which motions we're going to be using. So for our 2 motions, we are going to be using the dodge, follow, float motion and the dodge, clear through, follow motion. And for our rotation, we're going to be using the clear through, fill, fill rotation. Both groups within our offensive sets are going to use both of these motions in these ways. The dodge, follow, float motion will be used by the midfielders to move from the 21 set into the 12 set, where the midfielder up top, here M1, will dodge down the alley, M2 will follow behind, and M3 will float out the backside. The dodge, follow, float motion will be used by the attackman to move from the 12 set into the 21 set, where an attackman behind, here A2, will dodge up the wing, A3 will follow behind, and A1 will float out the backside. The dodge, clear through, follow motion will be used by midfielders to move from the 12 set into the 21 set, where M2 up top will dodge to either side, here he dodges to his right, M1 will clear through, and M3 will follow behind. Now, it's important to note that as M2 dodges, he may carry past the traditional point of a 21 set, but once he moves the ball, he will need to occupy the space he should in the 21 set, or the midfielders will have to rotate again. The dodge clear through follow motion will be used by attackmen to move from the 21 set into the 12 set. With A3 dodging at X to either side, here he will dodge to his right, A2 will clear through to the crease, A1 will follow behind. Once again, if A3 gets too far up the wing, he will need to get back right after making his pass, or the attack will have to rotate again. Finally, the clear through rotation is very simple. It pretty much means that whoever is being dodged at needs to clear through and get to the crease, and the other players in the grouping need to rotate with the clear through. So here we'll go over two separate examples. The first example, we will run a dodge clear through follow from X out of a 21-21 set. This example is easy because the clear through is a part of the motion. As A3 starts his dodge to his right, A2 is in his way, so A2 needs to clear through to the crease. In the next example, we will run a dodge follow float with the midfielders out of a 21-21 set. As M1 dodges down the alley, A1 is in his way, so A1 will need to clear through to the crease, A2 and A3 will need to fill, ultimately moving the attack from a 21 into a 12. Before we get into how these motions and the rotation work together to create our complete motion offense, I want to talk about exactly how we want to train these with our players. The first thing we want to do is train the three-man motions with our midfielders and with our attackmen so that they all understand exactly what their jobs are. And we can do this by using a skeleton offense set like 3VOs or do 3v2s and 3v3s. I also like to add in drills where we actually have our players rotate and then we throw a ball in so they can get used to the idea that they're going to have to rotate as a reaction to the other group before using what we teach them in our 3VOs, 3v2s, and 3v3s. And what this is going to do is this is going to make sure that our players understand their jobs and what they need to be doing as they're running through the complete offense, but within a much smaller scale drill that they can often understand a lot easier. Additionally, here are some things that we want to keep in mind while we are training our 3VOs, 3v2s, and 3v3s. First, we want to make sure that we are continually harping on the idea of spacing. As players move in their dodge follow float or dodge clear through follow, we want to make sure that they understand the idea of spacing and that they do not want to allow one defenseman to play two so that we have as many options as we possibly can within our offensive set. The second thing that we want to keep in mind is the continuous nature of these motions. And so there are three ways that we want to think about this. The first is merging two motions together. So if we imagine our dodge follow float, as we run our dodge follow float, we actually build and create the opportunity to run our dodge clear through follow. So if we dodge follow float, throw the pass back, and then dodge again from there, each motion in itself creates the opportunity to run the next motion. And so one of the things that you'll find is that players oftentimes get confused when they're running from one motion into the other. And I like to be very Socratic when I'm working with my players by asking them some questions and saying things like, okay, so we ran our dodge follow float and that starts in A, and they'll say 21. I'm saying, well, where do we end up? And they say 12. Okay, and so in our 12 set, what motion do we run? And they'll say we run a dodge clear through follow. And if you're in this position in a dodge clear through follow, what's your job? And ultimately, they will end up discovering the answer to their question or the reason why they became confused by themselves rather than having me just yell at them that they needed to say follow in that position versus something else. I think that coaching style works really well. The second part of the continuous nature of these motions is that sometimes one motion will bleed into another. And so the example here is if we're running a dodge clear through follow from the top with M2 and he dodges to one side and he just dodges too far, ultimately he could end up making the midfielders run from a 12 into a 21 into a 12 again. And the key here is that players need to understand that they should just try to maintain the spacing and then try to get back into their 12 or 21 set rather than being overly concerned with the fact that M2 dodged way too far. It's not that he dodged too far, it's just that we have to make sure we continue to rotate so we maintain our spacing. The third part of the continuous nature is that somebody is just gonna screw up. And it's important that players understand, even if they screw up or even if another player screws up, all we really have to make sure we're doing is finding our group and finding where we should then fit into our group. And if we have to communicate and tell somebody to go somewhere else, or we have to bust our butt to get to another part of the field so that we are once again, in our rotation and in our motion offensive concepts, that we actively do that. The key is that everybody's going to mess up at some point and everybody's going to be out of position at some point. But how do you react to that situation and recover and then regain our formation or our motion after you've screwed up? And the third thing that we have to keep in mind when we're training these motions is the skills that we want our players to use. Regardless of what motion we're using, regardless of whether we're in a 3v0, 3v2, 3v3, or 6-on-6 set, we have to make sure that at every single level we are teaching and implementing the exact skill that we want to see in the complete offensive set. The bottom line is that no offensive concept, whether it's a cool set play, a really good motion offense, is ever going to work without the players having the skills necessary to actually complete those motions. So as we are training this, we need to make sure that we're not only talking about the motions, but we're talking about the skills that they will need to use within the actual complete motion offense. The last part that we have to cover before we put it all together and build our complete motion offense is all of the passes that players are going to need to make. And each pass, depending on where the ball carrier is and where the player catching the ball is, all have different names, and we should be using that vocabulary on the field all of the time. We will diagram this by beginning our motion with a midfield dodge from M1 down the left alley. The first two passes that players should always be able to make are the forward and backward outlet passes. So here, A3 is M1's forward outlet, and the call for this pass would be forward. M2 is M1's backward outlet, and the call for this pass is back. The next pass that M1 may be able to make is a pass inside to A1 after the clear through. The name for this pass is inside. The final passes that may be available to M1 are A2 or M3, and these are called through passes. There are two huge reasons why we want to make sure that every distinct pass has its own vocabulary. The first is that as we have a huddle and we're trying to tell our players about a specific look that we see from the sideline, say it's M1 dodging down the field and the player on the crease who's floating out is open, we want to be able to describe that really quickly. And to do that, we need to have already named that type of pass. And so in that sense, we'd say, hey, when you're dodging down the alley, make sure you see the through look. The second reason is that players are going to attach what they are mechanically doing with their bodies with what they are hearing audibly. So in that same example, if the player dodging down the alley hears back, he knows that he can roll away and pass the ball back, where if it's forward, he can throw it forward. And those things are going to help our players be more fluid and react quicker in a game than they would if they were using words like hey or help or just a name. Now that we understand all of the pass names, what we're going to be looking for within our offense, we can build our complete motion offense. And so as we go into this example, we're going to show you exactly how the motions and the rotations work together in one continuous set of offense, rather than dividing it up into smaller segmented parts. And to save on time, we're not going to go over all of the passing options. Just understand that at any time during this example, each player has the options to throw forward, back, inside, and through. We will start with the classic alley dodge down the righty alley with M1. This initiates the dodge follow float motion and the attack clear through rotation and transitions us from a 21-12 into a 12-12 set. A3 calls forward and M1 steps away and passes to A3. A3 immediately swings the ball to A2. A2 catches the ball and dodges up the right wing, initiating the attack, dodge, follow, float motion and the midfield clear through rotation, taking us back into our 21-21 set. M2 yells forward and A2 steps away and passes to M2, who swings it across to M1. M1 dodges the righty alley again, initiating the dodge, follow, float motion, clear through attack rotation, and puts us back into our 12-12 set. But this time, M2 yells back, so M1 uses a question mark and passes back to M2. Once M2 catches the ball, he immediately dodges to his left, starting the dodge clear through follow midfield motion and no attack rotation, taking us from our 12-12 set into a 21-12 set. A2 yells forward and M2 steps away and passes forward to A2, who swings it immediately to A3. At this point, depending on how far down M2 gets on his dodge, the midfielders may have to rotate again, but here he passes the ball early and regroups up top into the 21 midfield formation. A3 catches the ball and immediately dodges up the left wing, initiating the dodge, follow, float, attack motion and no midfield rotation. M1 yells forward, A3 steps away and passes to M1, who catches the ball, hears A1 yell through and passes the ball through to A1, who shoots and misses wide. A2 goes to pick up the ball in the 21-21 set and dodges to his right, initiating the dodge, clear through, follow, attack motion and no midfield rotation, and moves us from our 21-21 set into a 21-12 set. A3 yells back, and A2 uses a question mark to throw back to A3, who immediately dodges up the left wing, initiating the dodge, follow, float, attack motion. M1 yells forward, and A3 steps away and passes up to M1, who swings the ball immediately to M2, who dodges the righty alley. This initiates the dodge, follow, float midfield motion and clear through attack rotation. A2 yells forward, and M2 passes to A2. At this point, M1 yells through, and A2 passes through the defense to M1, who steps into space and fires a shot and scores. As we went through that offensive progression, I hope that you got a great feel for exactly how these motions and rotations can fit together to create a complete motion offensive concept. And so the key thing to remember with the 21-12 motion offense is that you can customize it to fit your exact team. Whether you're very basic or very advanced, you can use motions and rotations that your players understand and limit it to whatever they are capable of so that your players can be successful within this offense. We can also do things where we keep specific players in specific spots based on the motions and rotations that we have. So if you have a midfield dodger that you always want dodging, or someone floating off the crease who's a great finisher, you can also implement that and make sure that your players are doing that as well. As we continue with this video series, we're going to add in a bunch of other 21-12 videos, like how to add in wing dodges, as well as our favorite motions and rotations that we like to run together and all of the looks within those, as well as the idea of starting our rotations and motions off of a pass rather than a dodge. I hope that you've enjoyed this video and that it's given you a great understanding of the 21-12 motion offensive concepts and ideology, and I would love to hear your thoughts on the overall concept as well as any other questions or concerns you have. So if you'd like to share, leave a comment in the comment section, or you can email me at patrick@powlax.com. And as always, if you'd like to learn more, make sure you check out all the other videos on POWLAXmastercoach.com. If this video really caught your eye, make sure to share it. Have a good one, and I'll see you in the next video.